Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Yo, 3 completions out of 6 attempts, 2 interceptions. Day 1 of minicamp. That is not a man competing for a starting job. That is a man fighting for his professional life. And from where I'm sitting, he is losing that fight badly. What is going on, everybody? I'm Dre Fiver. You are locked into Dre Reports. And today we are getting all the way into the Dillon Gabriel situation in Cleveland. Because what is happening in Berea right now is not subtle, it is not complicated, and it is not something this Browns organization is even pretending to hide anymore. Dillon Gabriel, the third-round pick out of Oregon, the quarterback who was somehow selected before Shedeur Sanders in the 2025 NFL Draft despite every logical argument pointing in the opposite direction, is being phased out, quietly, methodically, and right in front of everybody's faces. Let's set the table because context matters. The Browns went into the 2025 season with what looked like a quarterback committee situation, but it turned into a full-blown organizational identity crisis almost immediately. Joe Flacco got traded to the Bengals mid-season. Dillon Gabriel stepped in and started 6 games, going 1-5. He threw for 937 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions across those starts, which sounds passable until you factor in the record. 1-5 as a starter. Then came a concussion. And when that door swung open, Shedeur Sanders walked through it, won his first NFL start against the Las Vegas Raiders, and never looked back. Sanders closed out the season, starting the final 7 games, going 3-4, and finishing the year by beating both the Steelers and the Bengals back-to-back. The man closed hot. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel barely saw the field again for the rest of the entire season, 2 more snaps total after Week 11. 2. That is the story of how the quarterback Cleveland passed on Shedeur Sanders to draft became an afterthought in his own building before his rookie year was even finished. Now we fast forward to the spring of 2026, and the Browns have a new head coach. Todd Monken is in the building, coming over from Baltimore, where he served as the Ravens' offensive coordinator, a man who spent his days coaching Lamar Jackson and building one of the most sophisticated passing games in the NFL. New energy, new system, new philosophy. And from the very first moment Monken opened his mouth about the quarterback room at a national media event, the message he was sending about Dillon Gabriel was crystal clear. Monken noted publicly that Shedeur Sanders had been in the facility a bunch over the previous few months working out and getting reps in, and that Dillon Gabriel, as far as Monken was aware, had not. Read that again. The head coach of your franchise, on a national stage, publicly confirms that one of his quarterbacks is putting in the work, and another one apparently is not. That is not an accident. That is not an oversight. That is a message. And I promise you Dillon Gabriel heard it loud and clear. And look, I want to be fair to Gabriel for a second because this is a young man's career we are talking about. He is 25 years old, came out of Oregon with 63 college starts across 3 schools, and the dude could absolutely play at the college level. He had production. He had accuracy. He had the kind of intangibles that scouts love to talk about in pre-draft evaluations. But here's what was always true about Dillon Gabriel. The physical tools were never starter level in the NFL. At 5'11", 205 pounds, without elite arm strength or elite athletic burst, he was always going to be a backup quarterback at the pro level unless he developed into something significantly beyond what he was on draft day. And the early returns in 2026 suggest that development is not happening fast enough for what Todd Monken is building. Multiple analysts have pointed out that Gabriel is simply not a natural fit for Monken's offensive system. And that matters enormously. You can be a talented football player and still be the wrong piece for a specific puzzle. That is what Dillon Gabriel is in Cleveland right now. But I am not going to let this Browns organization off the hook, because they created this mess themselves. Dillon Gabriel should never have been drafted in the 3rd round over Shedeur Sanders. Full stop. The Cleveland Browns sat there in the 2025 NFL Draft, looked at Shedeur Sanders, a decorated college quarterback with elite processing ability, uncommon pocket poise, and a resume that included finishing as one of the most accurate passers in college football history, and they passed on him to take a developmental backup 2 rounds earlier. Think about what that single decision cost this franchise in terms of perception, in draft capital management, and in the drama and dysfunction it injected into the entire 2025 season. Because the moment they drafted Gabriel at 94 overall and then turned around and took Sanders at 144 in the same draft, they guaranteed themselves exactly this storyline. The moment where it becomes undeniable that the order was wrong, the evaluation was wrong, and the player they passed on is the player they actually want running their offense. Dre's opinion? Whoever was responsible for that decision should have been let go right alongside Kevin Stefanski. You do not get to bungle the most important position in professional sports twice without consequences. Now, let's talk about what happened at voluntary minicamp, because the day one data tells you everything you need to know about where this is headed. On April 21st, 2026, the first day of Todd Monken's voluntary minicamp in Berea, every quarterback in the room took reps in 11-on-11 and 7-on-7 drills. Watson went 10 for 15. Sanders went 10 for 16 with 1 interception. Gabriel went 3 for 6 with 2 interceptions. Now, without knowing names, just looking at those 3 stat lines, which quarterback is genuinely in the competition for a starting job, and which one is fighting to stay on the roster? The answer is not complicated. But here is what made it even more damning than just the raw numbers. Gabriel was not receiving first-team reps in any comparable way to Watson and Sanders. Monken made sure both Watson and Sanders had meaningful work with the starters. Gabriel received reps only in the third and fourth team periods, after Watson had already gotten a second set in one of those same periods, and only after Sanders had gone first. The structure was intentional, confirmed by Monken as a deliberate plan he approved coming from his quarterbacks coach. When the media pushed back on whether this was simply a two-man race, Monken said he would not call it a two-man race and that everybody at every position ought to be competing regardless of rep distribution. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a head coach protecting a young player's confidence and keeping the room unified. But when you combine that statement with the fact that Gabriel is getting third and fourth team reps, was reportedly not in the building this offseason while Shedeur was putting in work, and is throwing 2 picks in limited action on day one. Brother, that is a two-man race. Todd Monken just does not want to say it into a microphone. And Gabriel's own response to all of this? He told reporters he was focused on running his own race. I do not knock the man for saying that. That is the right thing to say publicly. That is the professional answer. But read between the lines, that is not a man who feels confident in his standing in that building. That is a man who is trying to stay employed and keeping his composure while doing it. Monken, for his part, praised Gabriel's professionalism and intelligence when speaking about him. And I want you to really hear those 2 specific words, professionalism and intelligence. Those are backup quarterback compliments. Those are the words you use for a guy you respect as a person and a teammate, but are absolutely not building your offense around. Professional and intelligent are not the words Monken used for Shedeur Sanders. For Sanders, Monken said the young quarterback has come miles in his progressions and his ability to run the offense since the beginning of the offseason program. Miles. That is a specific charged word from a man who spent years coaching Lamar Jackson. When Todd Monken says a quarterback has come miles, you listen. Now, the external pressure on the Browns to make a move on Gabriel is real and mounting. The organization has been actively urged to trade him before training camp opens, with the argument being straightforward. The Browns now have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, in Gabriel, Watson, Sanders, and 6th-round rookie Dillon Gabriel from Arkansas, who was drafted in the 2026 draft. General Manager Andrew Berry said after the draft that the current plan was to roll with all 4. Okay, Andrew. But everybody in that building knows those 4 are not equal. Watson and Sanders are competing for the Week 1 starting job. Green is a developmental rookie who is going to sit and learn. And Gabriel is stuck in football purgatory, too accomplished to quietly release without it becoming a story, not good enough for the scheme Monken is installing, and occupying space that could go toward reps that actually matter for the real competition. The math does not add up. It never did. Multiple analysts have connected Gabriel to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons as potential trade destinations. And here is the part that ought to make every Cleveland fan feel a certain kind of way. If Gabriel ends up in Atlanta, he would be reuniting with Kevin Stefanski, the same head coach who chose Gabriel over Sanders as his starter early in 2025, before everything fell apart. That tells you exactly how this entire situation was shaped from the very beginning. Stefanski believed in Gabriel. The people currently running Cleveland football do not share that belief, and that disconnect is why we are having this conversation right now. Let me explain why Gabriel does not fit Monken's offense on a football level, because this is not just about rep politics or organizational drama. There is a real schematic reason this is happening. Monken is a passing game architect at his core. The offenses he built at Georgia and then in Baltimore were constructed around timing, precision, pre-snap intelligence, and a quarterback who can process multiple levels of a defense quickly enough to get the ball out in rhythm before coverage breaks down. What that system demands above everything else is arm talent combined with mental processing speed. Shedeur Sanders is built for exactly that kind of offense. His college tape, showing him completing over 67% of his passes at Colorado across 2 seasons, revealed a quarterback operating with uncommon patience and surgical anticipation. Watson, when healthy, brings the arm strength and mobility that can make Monken's scheme dangerous in a completely different way. Gabriel, at his size and with his athletic profile, was never going to naturally thrive in that environment. The minicamp stat line on day 1 was not a fluke or a bad day. It was a preview. Now I want to bring in the bigger picture of what the Browns are building here, because the quarterback drama is only one piece. When analysts were breaking down how many wins Todd Monken could realistically add to this team in 2026, the consensus was nuanced and honest. It is not purely Monken as an individual, it is the collective improvement. A better offensive line. Players entering their second and third years in the system developing chemistry and confidence. A more functional offense as a philosophical concept, replacing what was demonstrably not working under Stefanski. The estimate was that with average-ish quarterback play, Monken's system and the culture shift could be worth 1 to 2 additional wins. But if the quarterback genuinely elevates, if Sanders or Watson takes a real step forward in this offense, then you start talking about a significantly more competitive Browns team than the one that went 5-12 last season. And that is exactly why Gabriel has to go. Every rep he takes in training camp is a rep that belongs to the 2 men who are actually competing for the job that will determine whether this franchise finally turns a corner. Here is something else worth sitting with. The Brandon Sorry conversation that has been circulating in Cleveland media circles speaks volumes about the overall confidence level in Gabriel's future with this franchise. There has been legitimate discussion in Browns insider circles about whether Cleveland would use a 2nd or 3rd round pick in a potential supplemental draft to acquire Sorry, the college quarterback currently fighting a gambling-related eligibility ruling. Think about what that says. People connected to this organization are publicly entertaining the idea of giving up a 2nd or 3rd round pick for an unproven commodity who has never taken an NFL snap, who has serious personal issues to resolve, and who would essentially have to sit out year 1. The logic being floated is that the talent justifies the risk, and that the pick is worth spending if it secures a legitimate long-term quarterback option. If the Browns' own media ecosystem is openly debating draft pick expenditures to add another quarterback into this mix, what does that tell you about the internal belief that Dillon Gabriel is a legitimate long-term solution? It tells you there is no such belief. 0. Insider reporting has pushed back slightly on the doom and gloom narrative around Gabriel, with Cleveland beat reporters noting that the new coaching staff has genuinely liked what they have seen from him this offseason, and that he is considered worth a longer look. And I want to be clear, I take that reporting seriously because the reporters covering this team are good at their jobs. But there is a meaningful difference between we like what we see in him as a person and a competitor, and he has a clear path to making this roster past the preseason. The rep distribution at minicamp, the offseason attendance gap, Monken flagged himself. The day 1 stat line, the mounting outside pressure to trade him, the confirmed interest from other franchises, all of that collectively tells a different story than the polished organizational language being used to keep Gabriel's dignity intact before the inevitable happens. Here is the absolute bottom line. The Cleveland Browns in the summer of 2026 are a franchise being rebuilt from the ground up under a new head coach who has a specific vision, a specific scheme, and a specific type of quarterback he needs to execute it. Watson is back from his Achilles injury, carrying an enormous guaranteed salary and legitimate motivation to prove that everything that went wrong in Cleveland was the injury's fault, not his. Sanders ended 2025 as the team's primary starter, closed the year beating division rivals, came into the building all offseason, switched back to his number 2 jersey, the number he wore throughout his entire football life, before the organization made him wear 12 as a rookie, and has been praised by Monken in the most meaningful possible terms for his development. Watson is the presumed starter on paper because of $46 million in fully guaranteed money. But the momentum, the energy, and the trajectory in that building are pointing somewhere else. And Dillon Gabriel is standing between none of it and none of it. He is being squeezed out. He is not going to make a scene. He is not going to demand a trade. He is going to keep saying he is running his own race, staying professional, staying ready, until the day Andrew Berry calls him in and tells him either he is being moved or he is being released. That day is coming before the end of July. The only real question left is whether the Browns can extract any value before it arrives, a late-round pick, a conditional swap, anything, or whether Gabriel walks out as a free agent, lands in Tampa or Atlanta, and spends the next 3 years proving he can play in a system that actually fits him, while Cleveland runs it back with the guy they should have committed to from the moment they drafted him. My read? Shedeur Sanders is going to win this job before week 1. The tea leaves are not subtle. Monken is building his offense with Sanders in mind. The coaching staff is clearly higher on Sanders than the official talking points are willing to admit publicly. And Sanders himself is behaving like a man who knows his moment is right in front of him, putting in the work when nobody told him he had to, studying the new system before the new coaches were even officially in the building, competing every single day without complaint. That is a franchise quarterback mentality. That is the mentality that wins these competitions. And Dillon Gabriel, professional, intelligent, hard-working Dillon Gabriel, just does not have the tools or the schematic fit to beat that in Todd Monken's offense. Cleveland is changing. The Watson era is ending, whether it officially ends this summer or 6 weeks into the regular season. The Gabriel experiment is over. And Shedeur Sanders, the player this organization tried to bury in the 5th round, the player who had to sit behind journeymen and retreads, and a man who was not even healthy, the player who got his shot and won his first start and then closed the year beating the Steelers, is about to get what should have been his from the beginning. That is the story. That is what is happening in Berea. And I am here to tell you, nobody is talking about it the way it deserves to be talked about. Until now. That is the full breakdown, people. You know what to do. Smash that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it tells the algorithm this content deserves to be seen. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Does Gabriel get traded or released? And does Watson or Sanders win the Week 1 job? I want to read every single response. If you are not already subscribed to Dre Reports, you are genuinely missing out on the most no-filter sports coverage on this platform. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you never miss a drop, and tell a friend who needs the real Browns conversation in their life. I'm Dre Fiver. No filters, no sugarcoating, just the truth. See you on the next one.